Because you are that, you are capable, you are gifted, and you are so unique. All of the things that you may hate about yourself are your strengths. It's okay to be soft. It's okay to be opinionated. It's okay to be different. And it's so okay to just be you. The world awaits to receive you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Blessings, family. Welcome to Secure Your Energy. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. You guys can see me. Today we're going to have a great broadcast. I hope you're ready for action-packed information. All right, as you know, we're starting a new broadcast here. Hold on one second. We're going to be following up behind our Primetime Home Buyers podcast. And as you know, we have a lot of members that came over here that wanted to follow up with some of the topics that we talk about on Primetime Home Buyers. So today, I do apologize. I just want to make sure that y'all can hear me. You can see me. Amazing. So today, what we were talking about today is zoning laws, and understanding how that applies to actual tax liens and tax deed sale. So we're going to advance that conversation tonight. As you know, on this channel, we're going to be talking about disparities that go on in the Black community, certain topics that we need to hone in on, that sometimes we are distracted because there's so much drama and trauma going on around us. But at the end of the day, we still have to be focused on the overall goal plan, and that's to build generational wealth. And before we can do that, we have to understand the obstacles, the system that we're in, and what to expect. So today we're going to go into housing discrimination through zoning practices. There's actually some legislative bills that has been enacted in 2021, representing from the White House, that we're going to go over. But before we do that, we're going to go and just get into an article that's brought to you by Eyewitness News. And this was in 2017. So we show you different time frames so we can, basically capture the concept that this has been going on a long time. And there's just different practices that are taking place right now that may make you think that it's not happening, but it really is. So we're going to go into this article that's brought to you by Eyewitness News 7. Let me just make sure everything is good on the screen. Yes. And you're here with your host, Grace Lashley, or also known as Grace Levi. You can check us out on Uncensored Enlightenment Talk, where the commentary and the dialogue and the content get a little bit more raw. Okay. So court rules Long Island Village engaged in housing discrimination. So let's listen to this video.
A legal rebuke tonight against the Nassau County village of Garden City, a federal ruling that it discriminated against Blacks and Latinos in a decision more than a decade ago when it planned to build a new housing development. A lawsuit brought by a group fighting for more segregation in a village that is about 88% white. So what now, Garden City? Here's Long Island reporter Kristen Thorne.
It's time for Garden City to stop supporting its past bias, its past discrimination, and realize that it has done wrong and change their ways.
Is this a new beginning for the village of Garden City? A federal judge has ruled that the village, in a 2004 zoning ordinance, intentionally tried to prevent minorities from moving into the mostly white area. The village has been fighting a 2005 lawsuit ever since. The ordinance stated that multifamily housing could not be built on this 25-acre piece of property on 11th Street. The contract was awarded to a developer of single-family detached homes. In the end, no homes were built here because of the legal drama. The site is now being used for a new Nassau County family court complex.
It's really not about that piece of land. It's about the bigger issue. It's about affordable housing in a place that basically has locked and chained the borders.
In 2014, the village appointed a fair housing compliance officer. 2 years later, it passed a law banning housing discrimination. Yet Garden City remains a predominantly white area. It's unclear if the village plans to appeal this latest decision. We tried numerous times to speak with the mayor today, but he wouldn't meet with us.
Garden City at this point and its decision makers need to stop wasting taxpayer funds fighting in the courts. We're not talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent to fight against people who want to be neighbors.
So, as you can see, excuse me, there's still major.
A male humpback.
I do apologize. There's still major issues in regards to housing discrimination and the different ways that there is actually being implemented. Hold on one second, guys. I'm trying to get things to go back to a smaller screen. So I want you to understand that some of the things we talk about is to enlighten you of the different pathways that this may be happening and you don't understand or didn't notice it. So we did talk about housing discrimination last week, and we even went into people who had actual Section 8 vouchers who believed that they were comfortable in a good situation to not have to deal with that. But when it comes to transferability, it's hard. So if you have a neighborhood like what they described in Long Island, where the zoning practices and the town has regulated that there's not going to be duplex homes. So they're keeping one family homes. And then if they already have the market locked, because that's some of the things that we talk about on prime time home buyers, is when you go and get your home appraised, it's usually supposed to be based on the surrounding homes, the value of those homes, the what they're selling, and a few other factors. But we have noticed when it comes to Black investors as well as Black just home buyers, there has been a severe disparity in this process. So he's going to read a little bit about this article, and then we're going to move on to share some more resources with you. So a federal court has ruled that in 2004, I was born, you was born. 2004 zoning decision by the village of Garden City discriminated against African Americans and Latinos. The Fair Housing Act ensures the promise of opening communities in federal laws, said Joe Rich, co-director of the Fair Housing Community Developer Projects at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, who represents the plaintiff in the case. The court decision reiterates that the village of Garden City exclusionary practices are unacceptable in American society. The lawsuit brought forth by Maham Management in New York Community for Change was filed against the village in 2005. So once they, as they stated in the video that we just watched, they jumped right on it, because at the end of the day, when you go into an area, and I'm not saying we can't have areas that are supposed to be allegedly for the rich and famous, but there's really should not be any area just that is excluded to one set of income of people, because the land is for everybody. And when it comes to zoning, as we talked about just in our last broadcast, zoning is supposed to be put together to actually have a cohesiveness in the society. But we have to talk about the mindset of who's setting the cohesiveness. And that is the problem here. So it's time for Garden City to stop supporting its past bias, its past discrimination, and realize that it has done wrong and change their ways. Attorney Frederick Burington said, it's really not about the piece of land. It's about the bigger issues. It's about affordable housing in a place that has basically locked and chained the borders. Okay. And this is not done with a physical lock and chain in the gate. It's literally done by income disparities. You know, if you have a group of people who don't run particular industries, but they work in the industries. And like, for instance, when I moved to Georgia, allegedly, I was told as a registered nurse in the hospital I was working at that I should not ask the pay rate. Now, sly undertones and fake regulations like this actually begets the process of discrimination. I end up finding out that I was making less than the new nurses. And it was not surprising, but I had to wake up to what was going on in the area that I was in. So you have to pay attention to the area that you are investing in. And this is to the buyback team. This is some of the things that I want to kind of branch into, because there are some zoning criteria that may affect your investment needs. Like, for instance, when we talked about zoning criteria is related to historical buildings. And as we highlighted, these historical buildings in um, certain areas, they receive tax deductions or tax lower because of the historical area, which at the end of the day, those historical areas actually builds the value of the property because in the area, because when we were in New York, my grandmother's house was worth $3 million at the time of her passing away, but they sold it for a far less amount because of, possibly not knowing the market, possibly not knowing how to shop around for buyers. That's why we talk about these things, because they low ball us. And even where we showed last week, where a black man had his neighbor come in and show the house, and the value went up over $200,000 or 150. Very, very remarkable change. So this is the first article that I wanted to share with you tonight. We're going to share this article in the actual comments, as well as we're going to share this article in the description if you guys are interested in actually just starting to pay attention to this, especially if you're real estate investors. Even if you don't go through the tax lien or tax deed route, it is important just to understand what's going on around you. So now we're going to go into a selection brought to you by PBS News Hour. Okay, and this is for information and educational purposes only. And this goes into how zoning can restrict or even prevent affordable housing. And you saw the example in the first video that we showed you. And now this is going to be another example. Okay. It's about 11-minute video. We're probably just going to watch about 5 minutes of the video, and then I'm going to share the link for you guys to watch on your own.
Roads to recovery, we reported on Connecticut's efforts to provide an economic rescue for some of the state's landlords and renters in Fairfield County. While that support is in response to the continued economic fallout caused by the COVID pandemic, the size and scale of the need points to a much larger systemic challenge that runs throughout Connecticut: the lack of affordable housing. In this next installment, Christopher Brooker reports on efforts to reform Connecticut's land use laws and the complicated mix of history, politics, and racial dynamics that impact who gets to live where. This segment is part of the initiative Chasing the Dream: Poverty and Opportunity in America.
But the site is quite isolated.
Yeah. Real estate developer Richard Friedman has had plans for this nearly 3-acre plot of land in Fairfield, Connecticut since 2014.
So I buy this site and I'm thinking, really?
Yeah.
Who could really care what goes up on this site?
Yeah. Tucked between Interstate 95, active train tracks, and a single house that sits at the far end of the property, the original plan was to build a 4-story building with 95 rental apartments. 30% designated as affordable. But after rejections from the town's Planning and Zoning Commission and a half-decade of litigation, Friedman's design on this plot of land is still just a plan.
This is how towns fight affordable housing: is if they can't beat you in court, they know that if they deny you, they can at least stall you. And if they can drag it out long enough,
use all your money,
sometimes they can kill it.
And Fairfield is in desperate need of affordable housing. Only about 2.5% of the town's more than 21,000 housing units are designated as affordable, fewer than any other city of its size in the state. To Friedman, Connecticut's localized zoning rules, coupled with an overwhelming preference for single-family homes on large lots, is in part driving racial segregation.
The fact that you cannot build multifamily housing that prevents Black and Hispanic people from moving into your town. There's just no two ways about it. And the correlations are almost exact.
In neighboring Bridgeport, the median household income is about $47,000. 80% of residents are minorities, and multifamily housing makes up more than 68% of the housing stock. In Fairfield, the median household income is nearly $139,000. 16% of the residents are minorities, and multifamily housing makes up about 14% of the housing stock.
Even 100 years ago, people generally didn't use overtly racist or racial language when these zoning ordinances were put into place. But they have been devastatingly effective in maintaining a town like Fairfield and many other towns in Connecticut as almost entirely white.
While inequality across Connecticut has been growing for decades, the events of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic, and an increased awareness of racial inequality following last summer's protests has led to new momentum for reform to where and what kind of homes the state builds.
We have an unprecedented chance to change the way that we think about zoning's impact on housing in Connecticut as a whole.
Sarah Bronin is the lead organizer and founder of Desegregate Connecticut, a coalition formed last summer to push for changes to the state's land use laws.
Our zoning laws, like zoning laws all over the country, have become overly restrictive. Right now, zoning in Connecticut has largely locked in large lot, single family, detached housing. And we know from demographic trends, even just looking at young people, they don't necessarily want to live in that kind of housing.
To quantify just how restrictive the state zoning is, this week, Desegregate Connecticut released a comprehensive zoning atlas of the state to show exactly what can be built in each of Connecticut's 169 towns and under what rules. In more than 90% of the state, a single-family home can be built without a public hearing under the existing zoning code. For a four-family home, that's true in only 2% of the state. Desegregate Connecticut is lobbying state lawmakers to significantly expand where smaller multifamily projects can be built, including by main streets and near transit stations, while removing the need for a public hearing. It's also pushing for reduced parking requirements and legalizing what are known as accessory dwelling units, separate apartments in single-family homes.
All right. So I just want to stop there because there were some things that we talked about on primetime home buyers of just basically sneaky ways. And I didn't say it in that broadcast, but there are some sneaky ways that zoning can actually blackball lower income people and businesses, as they told them. Parking regulations as well. If you have a parking coordinates for a neighborhood that is restricted to 2 cars per home, then that will be a hard time for you to actually build a 4-family duplex or a 2-sided building. So with that goes to say, when you look at the mean income of these particular areas, you kind of get an idea of what type of homes to expect and what type of geographics. Because as they say, the ones who had the highest amount of 1-family homes had the highest amount of income. And the ones who had the dualplex, they had more minorities and a lower amount of mean income. And it is a correlation between some of this data. So we're going to share about a few more minutes of this, and then I'm going to let you watch the rest on your own.
Bronin acknowledges that in Connecticut, changes at the state level will mean local municipalities will have to cede some control.
Is it possible to convince the public and the localized towns that change is necessary and change should come?
I think that there is an emotional moment right now that our proposals and coalition is moving in sync with. At the same time, for those who are not moved by the moment, there are plenty of studies and reports that have shown that zoning
Okay, okay. I don't know how much you guys missed, but what I'm going to do is just reiterate what I've said. And what I said was this person who worked in the Democratic Party, what she was saying was, to me, the way Democrats talk to us all the time in terminologies that can be mixed up. So I do apologize for the broadcast kicking off. It wasn't supposed to do that. Little weird, but we're going to show you again specifically what she said, and we're going to break it down if you missed it.
McCarthy Vahey has supported
Let's go back
is
again.
going to be like
Listen,
an inclusive community.
listen.
and also represents part of Fairfield for more housing options with concerns from existing residents. She co-chairs the Planning and Development Committee in the Connecticut General Assembly and also represents part of Fairfield.
We experience what a lot of the communities in Fairfield County do, which is
Listen
that
close.
struggle and that tension between what we aspire to in terms of, I think a lot of us want to be an open, welcoming, and inclusive community. But then when people have moved into an area and they have an expectation about what their home is going to be like, and then they learn that, wait, there's this other ability for things to happen. I think sometimes people, they get upset.
Let's stop. Now, if y'all did not hear, I'm going to break that down in lame terms of what I think she said. Basically, she talked about how the town wants to be progressive, allegedly, and move forward to open up the geographics. But instead of talking about the current community, like she should have addressed in their values and their practices, she focused on the people who will be coming into the community, having expectations, I believe, of being treated equal and being accepted, but being greatly surprised when that does not happen. So if you missed that commentary because they knocked me off the internet, then we just had to say it to you, say it one more time, because I want you guys to really, really get a gist of what they say sometimes that we miss in their commentary. So now we're going to move forward to just a federal article. I'm going to skim over it. And this is a article that was updated at in the White House. This is at whitehouse.gov. And basically they address zoning discrimination, and allegedly this was put up around Juneteenth 2021. This is exclusionary zoning, its effect on racial discrimination. You can find this article, and I'm going to share this with you guys on whitehouse.gov. And you will see that not only does private governments are being forced to address this, but as well as on a federal level in our White House, because this is an issue across the United States. Because as we mentioned last week, a lot of these coordinates and ordinance are still within the actual codes of these communities. And I'm not saying that they're applying it allegedly, but they're applying something that there's still a tremendous wealth gap. Okay, so we're just going to skim through this. And as I told you, this is exclusionary zoning, its effects on the racial discrimination in the housing market. This was June 17th, 2021. We went back as far as 2017. I did find something else that I wanted to show you, but I said I'm not going to go all the way back to the 80s when they was rapping about this type of discrimination. So I'm just going to read the background, and then it is shared with you. It's about a 3-minute read. Exclusionary zoning laws place restriction on the type of homes that can be built in a particular neighborhood. As you saw, common examples includes minimum lot size requirement, minimum square footage requirement, prohibition of multifamily homes, and limits on the height of the building. So that's going to limit how many units you can have in it. And when it says minimum required of footage requirements, so if you find something by back team when you're doing your zoning research that seems a little weird, like wow, you have to put a 2 acre, or let me say 225 square feet home on this particular lot, no less. I'm just throwing out something. You're gonna be like, wow, that's gonna take a lot to construct, a lot of money. Also, you want to take in consideration permits that's needed in certain areas. Like in Jersey, you won't need as many permits. You need permits to do stuff. But like here in Georgia, even to get your gate refined, you got to get a permit. Definitely adding the structure. So you want to know those zoning laws as well. And this is to the buyback team, my investment team. These are the things you want to know before you end up with a lot in a town similar to this. And then you have a hard time developing it because of one, you want to keep in mind that when you're in a particular area, you're not going to have a vendor from where you're at. If you're in New York and you're investing in Maryland, my vendor most likely is going to come from Maryland. If we have somebody from New York, they're probably distributing resources such as building materials, probably get at a better price. But the construction, unless you're going to house and pay for extra for that construction team from another state to be there, that's virtually impossible. So I want to give you an example. While we were in Maryland, I need basically to get the borders of my property aligned. So, I called to get this done, and they said, well, we can basically outline the property for you, but it's going to cost about $1,500. Now, I'm like, that is not the typical price that I have researched in the area. So to me, that tells me that that vendor who I was actually trying to get, making sure that the property was zoned right as well as the borders of the property, was practicing some type of subliminal or passive discrimination. So I have even experienced that in the buyback team. We were just in Maryland. So it happens. But if I was a fool, I would have been paying him $1,500, knowing the process is only $500, and it's usually based on the size of the land, the agriculture of the land. Like if it's on a hill, of course, the person who has to basically lay out the lining of the property is going to have a hard time. It's not going to be easy. So of course they're going to charge you more. So the land, the location, things like that do play a part, and the economy of the area. But be aware. So just a little bit more into this. The origin of such laws date back to the 19th century, as many cities were concerned about fire hazards as well as light and air regulations, allegedly. In the subsequent decades, some zoning laws has been used to discriminate against people of color and to maintain property prices in suburban areas and more recently urban neighborhoods. So, and that's where we talk about gentrification. And when redlining takes place, where literally you'll be a group of black people living there for a long time, and then you'll have bankers of other nations find value in that area and want to take it. Like I was talking to someone who was by the Savannah area, and she mentioned to me that around the Savannah area there were a few good big pieces of land that slaves received as they were emancipated. And these lands were actually either reallocated back to the government through eminent domain, or they were sold at such a low price through tax liens and tax deed sales, um, through the increase of taxes. So me and you will probably be able to pay the taxes on a property. But if you have somebody else who's been living here for having it in their family generations for 20 years, and they used to pay $100 taxes, and every year it goes up, and now they're in 2023 and their taxes is $2,500, and they're grandma, and maybe they don't have the support, maybe they got a little bit behind in bills. These things happen, and that's how gentrification takes place, with the increase of taxes, with people moving into the area, big businesses, and the income of the people are not rising. The income has to rise along with the inflation, and that's the severe imbalance. So I'm going to share this article with you guys just to let you know they're still addressing the same issue. It never stopped. It never stopped. They're still addressing the same issue. So now we're going to go into East Bay Housing Organization, how we got here. This housing inequality website that I found is very remarkable. They have a lot of information pertaining to discrimination on different levels in the Black community. So I found it very interesting, but I wanted to focus on zoning practices. So as you can see, we're going to start from the top, and they have a lot of information here. And this website is called the East Bay Housing Organization, Affordable Homes for All. Let me just make sure that you can see it nice and clear. All right, so they go into how we got here at housing inequality, and then they have a table of contents here. So, success in life is rooted in stable homes for all ages and people. When we have safe, secure places to live, parents earn more, kids learn more, health and well being improve, our community are strengthened, and our regions have the building blocks for a striving region. So, how did we get to the place where tens of thousands of people experiencing homelessness in the Bay Area? Now, I like the way that they broke this down. This is specific to the Bay Area. So they talked about colonization of East Bay, the economic built on slavery, racial segregation in housing, housing discrimination, race, income, disability, LGBT community, displacement, gentrification. So we're not going to get into all of this, but I will share this link with you because it seems like they break down the concepts really well for you, because I really think that us as the Black community, we miss out on these concepts because we deal with a lot of emotions. You know, we deal with a lot of how you feel, what you think it should be, but we really have to really just focus in on specifically what it is, how it's running, and dealing with reality. I definitely wanted to put that out there. We got to stop doing that. So let's go stroll all the way down. It's a section that I wanted to highlight: racial segregation in housing. And this is brought to you by NPR. NPR has a little short stop here before we watch this full video. Last week we showed a section where the young lady talked about how her father was locked out of a Jersey suburb, and they said that they had the money. They had the money to purchase the home they wanted, but every time they went to realtors, they said, "Oh, we had nothing in your price range, nothing in your price range." I just want to go into how money is depleted out of the Black community through these practices, because for example, there was a lady at the beginning of the pandemic. Her husband and her were looking to purchase a home and build it up from scratch. And it was a great economy before the pandemic hit. So, what they did, which was a little bit too fast to me, but they needed, I guess, the fundamental amount of money to get started, they sold their original home. And when they sold their original home, they said, "Hey, it's going to take a year to build this property, so we could just Airbnb. You know, we could just do it like this while we're paying on getting the home built." To my understanding, the contract was that they were paying monthly, and it was going to be built in a year. And they did have some like financial needs as far as lenders being attached to the money needed to be paid. Make a long story short, because of the deregulation of the Dodd-Frank Act and us as brown melanated people not reading the contract in detail, and that's why we're going into law on the primetime home buyer, because we're going to teach the buyback team how to find the law, read the law, and try to understand it as much as possible, or find the resources that can actually break down key concepts that you need to know. There's a lot of legal aid available for people where you'll take your base knowledge and go talk to a legal expert. It is not that hard. So, moving on, what ended up happening with this person is that not only did they depleted their actual foundation of the money they needed through renting Airbnbs for almost 2 years, but the contractor actually backed out on the contract, which caused them to lose everything that they originally put in because there was a clause of convenience. That's why we read buyback team. A clause of convenience would basically say this company, if in any words or any terms, if they had something better that will benefit them, and this was very broadly written, that they can back out and renege out the contract. And they did not know this, so they kept literally just taking money from these people, kind of slowed down building a home, and resold the loan to someone else for more amount when the market started to inflate. Because when they started, let's say the home they were building was worth $200,000. When the market inflate, as of now, that home is probably worth $450,000. So that contract is saying, hey, I'm not going to honor that. And that's how housing segregation, redlining, and discrimination happens. So I just wanted to share those stories with you guys. This is exactly some of the things that I've seen. You know, I grew up in a medium income home, but I was all over and was able to see everything. And I'm talking about lead coming off the floor, rat roots and rodents all over the place, infestations. And I know exactly what she's talking about. And it's heart wrenching because to know that it's certain mechanisms that's set up to literally keep us and create these type of environments is severely disturbing. And the younger generation should understand what's going on. That's why we continue to bring these subjects up. We're going to continue to speak highly in conversations related to these economic issues in the Black community. So let's just finish off. We got a minute and a half in this video, and then we're going to get to one more section in the broadcast to kind of wrap things up and put it together for you guys so you can see the many different mechanisms that are used to actually continue this protocol. You guys need to visit this website. This is an amazing website. And as I told you, this is regarded to the Bay Area, and they broke this thing down. But this is the actual example of a redlining map. If you can see here, and as he said, red areas, the borders. You see how they kept us at the borders? Is the red hot areas with the minorities and the Negroes. The yellow was a little bit more progressive, as they stated. And then as you move forward, these were areas green. These were the ones high income, things like that. But this is the issue, keeping us out in these areas. And as I told you, sometimes these areas become hot spots, and then gentrification happen, and the people who live here end up having to migrate to other areas and not even having the funds or the income or the capability to do so. And that's called gentrification. So the map above shows neighborhood color coded block by block. This is a map that banks use to determine whether or not they can make mortgage loans to people and at what rate. The color codes assign value based on perceived risk of the neighborhoods losing value on the property of the home. It is also mapped to where most white high wealth people who have been here for many generations live. That's the green section. And the black, Chinese, and other people of color are new immigrants live in the red section, which sometimes were literally also industrial sites, as we talked about. And when we were talking about zoning regulations, usually what they would do was set coordinates where homes wouldn't be by factories, as we talked about that buyback team. But it seems that in the areas where you see red, they had different coordinates and zoning practices where they will have these toxic facilities next to homes in the urban area, which increase the risk for medical health issues, such as what they talked about. Example, cancer, diabetes, things like that. Finding more toxicity in the water, which was increasing lead issues. There was a point in the 90s where they were testing kids at school because the lead was so high in the area of Newark. And I know they had to do that in other cities as well. as they talked about, what is that area where they literally all the water was poison? If y'all know what area I'm talking about, leave it in the comment. And right now, we have not heard about these communities actually having their piping system updated and things like that. Literally rusted, poisonous water, black water going into it. And then one of them was Flint, Michigan. I definitely knew one of them was Flint, Michigan. So, map inequality, redlining, and New Deal America. So, this is more detail. Use interactive map to see how redlining was determined down to the neighborhood level and mapping inequality. Redlining in New Deal America. So, you can open up that link and you'll be able to go in and look at a map that's going to help you break down and understand the quarter coordination of it and some of the principles behind it. We're going to share that with you in the comments, as well as have that in the description when the video is over. So now we're about 48 minutes into the broadcast, and we're going to move into just finishing up some of these concepts and ideas that we really think that the Black community should be aware of. Okay, so we have one more video that we want to share with you. This video is brought to you by Politics and Prose, and they are going to talk about Andrew Perry, Know Your Price, valuing Black lives and properties in American Black cities. This is an hour broadcast, and we will not be sharing the 4 hour broadcast with you, but we will get into about 10 to 15 minutes of it. And I just want you guys to take your time, go into the link yourself, and you'll be able to look at these things to its totality, because we don't want to just talk about things that we're just sharing our opinion. We want to show you some facts here, so you won't think that, oh, we're just dealing with emotions and things like that, because we don't deal with that. We deal with facts, and we come up with strategies and plans so we can move forward. So we're going to share this last video with the family that's brought to you by Andre Perry and Know Your Price, valuing Black lives and property in America. Let's get this started.
Inclusion. Prior to his welcome to PMP Live, Andre Perry. Andre is a fellow in the Metropolitan Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. His research focuses on race and structural inequality, education, and economic inclusion. Prior to his work at Brookings, Perry has been a founding dean, professor, award-winning journalist, and activist in the field of education. Know Your Price establishes a new means of determining value of Black communities. The deliberate devaluation of Blacks and their communities, stemming from America's centuries-old history of slavery, racism, and other state-sanctioned policies like redlining, have tangible, far-reaching, and negative economic and social impacts. Rejecting policies shaped by flawed perspective, the book gives fresh insights on these impacts and provides a new value paradigm to limit them. Right before we get started, or you get started, Mr. Perry, first thing I would like to ask you is just how are you doing at this moment in time?
Well, this has been a very tough few days for all of us, I think. This past Sunday, Jacob Blake became the latest victim of state-sanctioned violence against Black Americans when he was shot 7 times in the back while
We're going to stop real quick, because at the end of this, about 15 minutes, we're just going to log off. But I do want to send love and blessing to Tyree Nichols. He is our latest victim of police brutality, and something that, as we showed you, can and may be related to this particular topic, because this is a cascade of issues that leads to how our Black men are treated in their areas where they live, and the perception of all Black men in these areas that they call red areas with high crime. God rest his soul. And we're going to let him say rest in peace too.
Few days for all of us, I think. This past Sunday, Jacob Blake became the latest victim of state-sanctioned violence against Black Americans when he was shot 7 times in the back while his children watched on. And we know that it was done by the Kenosha, Wisconsin police officer. And while Blake survived this shooting, he's reportedly paralyzed, but there's been a lot of demonstrations, most notably the NBA, the National Basketball Association, just yesterday canceled or they forfeited a game and players decided not to play. Other leagues jumped in. So it's interesting you asked me that question today. I jumped in. You know, basketball, when you grow up in the city like I did, that you hear the phrase, who got next on the court every day? Who got next? Well, today, I essentially took a day off of work. I did my own personal strike because I wanted to put everything on pause. This was the only obligation that I said I would commit myself to, because it is a platform in which I can express my thoughts and views on structural inequality in this country. So I'm not doing well, but I do have the privilege of having information. I have a book, I have a platform, and I'm going to use it. The title of my book, Know Your Price, I usually end with this, but I'm going to begin because I think it really encapsulates how I'm feeling in this moment. The title of the book, Know Your Price, comes from my favorite play in the whole wide world by August Wilson. Many of you will know this play. It's Two Trains Running. In the play, the main character, Memphis, is about to have his property seized by the city of Pittsburgh. And the city of Pittsburgh offers Memphis $15,000 for his property, in which the main character, Memphis, says, no, I'm not selling my property for $15,000. I know my price. I got my price. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's a refrain that's stated throughout the play. I know my price. I got my price. There's another character, Hambone, who paints a fence in exchange for a ham. He paints the fence, but he never gets his ham. And throughout the play, he goes, give me my ham, give me my ham, give me my ham. But he never receives it. And we're not sure if he had mental illness before he made the deal to paint the fence, but eventually he goes crazy and dies. But there's actually a happy ending. I know the listeners are going, wow, that's pretty depressing, but there's actually a happy ending. The main character, Memphis, gets $35,000, well above his asking price. And it's assumed he's getting the market rate or the white rate. And the moral of the story, he gets $35,000, but the moral of the story is you better know you have worth. What I try to do with my book, Know Your Price, is give people the price to stand on. And during these times, we must take a stand that race and racism are not these neutral issues, that each and every one of us must take a stand. So I wanted to really have a book that gave people the information, that gave them enough information to stand on. The anchor study for this book was a study on housing prices. Now, it's a very wonky topic, but I really tried to personalize it. When I go home every few months or so, I visit my family home, which is now boarded up. It's essentially worth $0. It's owned by the borough of Wilkinsburg, which is a small Black municipality surrounded by Pittsburgh on 3 sides. And it's worth so much more to me because as the story is told in the book, and it was told to me, I was a woman by the name of Elsie Boyd, made a deal with my maternal grandmother that I would live with Elsie Boyd, who I call Mom. My biological mother was poor. She was probably abused. My father was in and out of prison. He was addicted to heroin. And so that deal was made, and I lived with this woman, and my brothers lived with this woman. And along the way, till I graduated from high school, about a dozen or so other kids stayed at various durations. But I stayed until I graduated from high school. So this house means so much more to me. But when I go back, it's worth $0. It just stupefies me that it can't be worth less in that regard. And so I started measuring housing prices. And so I started looking at homes in metro areas, homes in neighborhoods, analyzing the price of those. And we know that when we found that homes in Black neighborhoods, where the share of the Black population is 50% or higher, homes in Black neighborhoods are priced less than homes in white neighborhoods, about half as much. But people will say that's because of education, that's because of crime, that's because of other issues that you can see. So and many of my colleagues at Jonathan Rothwell at Gallup and David Harshbarger at Brookings, we controlled for those issues. We controlled for crime, we controlled for education, we controlled for walkability and all those fancy Zillow metrics. And what we found after getting an apples to apples comparison between homes in equivalent homes in equivalent social circumstances, we found that homes in Black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home.
Would you like to learn a brand new and innovative way to invest your extra money that has a low barrier to entry and low competition? What if I told you that it is a guaranteed method to get up to 18 to 20% return on your investment? Tax lien and deed purchasing is the only way to get into the real estate market through the back door. No credit and no loans needed. This method isn't commonly taught, and therefore the competition is very low, for now. Put together a 14-hour info-packed course which will teach you everything you'll need to know to get started. Learn at your own pace, step-by-step guided video and aids to start you on the TLC deed investment process. The course offers many learning tools for new investors, helping ensure you safely invest in tax liens and deeds. Contact us today and join the buyback team.